Hey, welcome everyone. My name is Tristan Claridge and I'm the convener of the Social Capital Research Group. In this session, we welcome a presentation by Ed DeJesus on social capital for youth economic mobility. So Ed is the founder of Social Capital Builders, which is a minority-owned social enterprise dedicated to changing the face of equity and access for youth and adults living in America's low-income communities through the power of social capital literacy, development and analysis. And he's doing some really amazing work with social capital, translating what is often really quite an academic kind of concept or theoretical concept into real practical applications, working with people, particularly in disadvantaged communities. So it's really great to have you here, Ed, and over to you.
Thank you, Tristan. As I said in the earlier webinar we did on for Social Capital Builders, thank you to all the members of Social Capital Research and all the academics and researchers for doing this work and being dedicated to enhancing people's knowledge about the power and potential of social capital. And hopefully our work here as Social Capital Builders will be a testament to the importance of the work you do. And we please urge you to do more work on this very important subject. I want to introduce everyone to a young man. You might know him. It's 20-year-old Edward DeJesus. That's me, a young father in the Bronx, having my first child at 20 years of age and wanting to do what most young African-American and Latino males want to do in New York City is take care of their families. So I went to a local workforce center for help getting the job, and they told me how to write a resume. They told me how to answer the 10 commonly asked interview questions, and they helped me get suited and booted. I was dressed for a T. And they told me how to look for a job, maintain a job, and actually follow up about the job. And they sent me out to Wall Street because that's where the money was. And I didn't get a call back. And they sent me to the New York City hospitals because that's where you can get good health benefits. And I didn't get a call back. And I was very distressed and distraught because here I was making an investment in the system and the system wasn't making an investment in me. So then I went to a fast food restaurant called Wendy's on Jerome Avenue in the Bronx. And my brother Joel knows about that place. And the manager was very excited to have me apply. He even had me take a test and I passed the test. And he said, Mr. DeJesus, I would love to hire you, but there's only one problem. You want to go to college. And to be an assistant manager at Wendy's, you have to work rotating shifts. And how are you going to have the job if you want to go to college? So I left that interview intent on taking that Wendy's job, which was a good job. Don't get me wrong, for everybody who's working in fast food, I'm not saying anything was wrong with that. But it meant that I could not go to college. And on the way home, I ran into my best friend and I told him the situation. And I'll always remember what he told me. He said, Ed, wait, I know somebody who could help. You have another move. And that next day, that next morning, I got a call from my best friend's father. Now, my best friend, I've known him for 15 years, since I was 5 years of age. And his best friend's Mr. Dowd, who just recently passed away from COVID-19 at 90-something years old. At that time, he was a director in the New York City Human Resources Administration, who told me, Ed, I want you to go down to the New York Human Resources Administration and speak to a woman named Shirley Gray. She has a job for you working the midnight to 8 a.m. shift at a homeless shelter. Guess who was able to go to college now and complete it? And why I tell that story, and I tell that story all across the country, is that no one told me about the power of social capital. No one told me to look at the value of my networks, right? They told me how to apply for a job, how to answer the 10 commonly asked interview questions, even how to get suited and booted. But no one, the policymakers, the academics, the professionals, no one told me to look at the power of my social capital. And what's really, really heartbreaking when I think back on this moment was Mr. Dowd's wife, Virginia Dowd. And I wish I should have told her to listen to this. She was my mother's best customer in the beauty shop on Fordham Road. Now, I know people from all over the world on this call, but there's something special about a Black beauty salon. You see, in a Black beauty salon, Black women love their children. And these Black women in the beauty shop known me all my life. What I should have been told, and what I tell every young person now, is, Ed, go to the beauty shop, suited and booted with your resume, and let that social capital that your mother have, that you have, all these Black women who work all throughout New York City, let them know that you want to be part of the labor market. You would get a job quicker. You would get a job at higher pay. You would get a better fitting job. Our young people are not being taught about the positive power of social capital. So I founded Social Capital Builders in 2018 to bring the social capital message to young people across the United States. And now through the partnership we have with Tristan and Social Capital Research, we're bringing it to young people throughout the globe. We found out that young people are surrounded by social capital assets, people who can really help them. And when we talk about social emotional learning, here we are as we have to teach young people social emotional learning, that they're a problem to be fixed. Instead of saying, how would Ed feel? How would little Edward DeJesus feel if he knows that his community is filled with opportunity agents? Opportunity agents that would help guide him into pathways, career pathways. Opportunity agents that will show him how to handle racism and discrimination. Opportunity agents who will help him figure out how to get into the hidden labor market. What would the power of a young person's emotional development change if we taught them about the power of the assets in their community? We know the unemployment problems of minority youth are tied to the unemployment problems of minority adults. But we also have to make sure through good training, through social capital research, that helping young people control for redundancy, helping young people know about opportunity flow and their position in the opportunity networks. So yes, there might have been a lot of redundancy in the Black beauty shop jobs, but that would have been a good first job for me. And that is what we're missing. So let's look at the United States now. Why? Right? Because 51% of current college graduates are unemployed or underemployed. Young people are investing. You could just look at the media. There's a big question about the value of four-year education because young people are not getting the economic returns for the investment in that education, especially given the price of that education. And Black graduates are almost twice as likely to be unemployed than their white counterparts. So despite education, despite training, despite credentialing, so many people are not finding their place in the labor market. Now, yes, we know there's policies out there, racism, discrimination, and there's policies that are created to address that. How effective have those policies been? How effective has Race to the Top, No Child Left Behind, and the millions and billions of dollars that have been placed in measuring what students know, but very little to no effort in measuring who students know? A crime is being committed. And I say that earnestly. If we do not help young people understand where they are in their opportunity networks, we just wrote a paper called Not Normally in Your Network. How are we able to help people achieve economic opportunities, especially when we know 80% of jobs in the United States, up to 80%, are up in the hidden labor market. That means they're advertised, not advertised or advertised improperly. Young people cannot apply for jobs that they do not know exist. They cannot dream about careers that they can't see. Let's look at the Black student college graduation rate. What is, and I always ask Tristan this, and he's looking at the research, but what is the value of being a student and having a connection with somebody on the other side of the labor market that could help you put your education to work? How much more likely would a student be not only willing to complete college and have the motivation and the grit to do so, but how likely would they want to go to college? So when I say the connection before the credential, I'm talking about college too. And do we live in a society where we cannot figure out how to make or how to help young people have social capital connections with key industry stakeholders before they begin education, while they're in training, and after their education? The current status, it's not producing the results. As we further look into the data, the results are not good for people of color. And I think something needs to be done about it. Education, credentials, job skills, is that equaling economic and social success? Well, something's missing: social capital. Now, as we know, there's about 147 or 127, Tristan will tell us, definitions of social capital. I'm going to share our definition of social capital as social capital builders. It's the value of an individual's connections to people, institutions, and organizations, right? So it's the value of my connection to people, to institutions, and to organizations. You'll hear about a course I teach here at the Maryland Innovation Center, which is part of the Howard County Economic Development Association, who saw the value of this approach and said, okay, we want to create a course on this for entrepreneurs. And why is that important? Well, it's important because anytime I go into entrepreneurs and I say, name the business development associations in your locality that are there to help you succeed and your personal connection at that organization, the majority of entrepreneurs don't even know they exist, let alone have a connection to these organizations that are receiving resources to help businesses succeed. So clearly there's a need to connect entrepreneurs to these entities, but not just to connect them to these entities, it's to have them build social capital, because as we know, networking is not social capital building, right? So have social capital building or have social capital so they could be in the information flow and have access to information. And I'll explain that in a while. So we have this course here. And as I'm teaching, social capital is the value of an individual's connections to individuals, institutions, and organizations. I have to reflect on my connections to institutions and organizations. And I forgot that that college I went to was Fordham University in the Bronx. And I never reached out to Fordham University. And I think they would be happy to know that their graduate is doing some great work around this topic. So I called them up and told them what I did, and they were very happy to receive it. And now they're planning on doing an article on me. Okay, so I had the social capital, but I didn't realize it. The same thing I'm teaching young people. And I'm going to suggest to all of you here, if you're studying social capital, you don't realize that you have social capital. You need to do social network analysis activities for yourself, because you're leaving the money on the table. And when I say money, I'm not talking only about financial. We know there's an economic value to social capital, but there's also tons of gains and other things that you can receive from having social capital. Information, better health, and we in the research, and I don't need to go through that because you should go on our webinars with social capital research and you'll learn all about that. So now we do a lot of work in violence prevention. So what does this have to do with violence prevention? Well, for those of you who work in the field and understand the stages of change, that, you know, workforce development is good, but those are young people who want a job, who want to be successful, right? You have some people who are at this in what we call the pre-contemplation stage of change, where they don't know they need to change. They don't know that things need to, their life has to be different, that they need to hang out with, that they have social capital, but they have the social capital that can get them a gun and drugs quicker than it could get them a job or education. So they have social capital, and Tristan and I kind of argue about this sometimes, right? Is there such thing as a negative social capital? And I guess he always says, he tells me, Ed, it's not, you know, it's what social, that's what social capital is. It's actually what you do with it. And I get that. But yes, young people have social capital, but they have the wrong type of social capital. But they're in that pre-contemplation stage where they know where they're not realizing that they need to make an investment in building pro-social capital assets. So, and in a social capital centered approach to education strategically utilizes social capital assets to help the young person self-discover and move them along the stages of change. And I'll give you an example of that. And this is the work we're doing with the county of Milwaukee right now. We're doing a restorative justice program based on a social capital approach for young people in the juvenile justice system. So we can tell young people that, okay, we start off with, we have a thing called the COVID model, and we're not talking about COVID-19, right? We're talking about COVID, the contagion of violence, incarceration, and death, right? So we base it on a health model, right? So there's this contagion of violence, incarceration, and death in your community. It was caused by the community's lack of lower immunity because of years of oppression, discrimination, racism, homophobia, and everything else, right? Certain people's immunity in that community has got very low and they got infected by the virus. Where you consciously do things that take away from your life and freedom as opposed to promote your life freedom, right? Like Will Smith, okay? For some reason, he got infected and did something very stupid, okay? And I just had to throw that in there because I was very upset over that situation. Because the message that we've been trying to send young people is that, yo, just because they disrespect you, you don't throw away your life and freedom, okay? That's, now, when you're affluent, maybe you don't have to worry about that. But for the young people I work with, that's real. But when you have a young person, right? So when you ask them, what is that contagion? And they tell you that contagion is, yo, man, we hear all the time, it's not illegal if you don't get caught. Something's wrong with that. Oh, okay. Well, we want to help you connect to the pro-social capital assets in your community who've overcome that. And we want you to get that information and come back to the circle and share that with your peers. But here's the social capital part. And after you share it, we want your credible messenger, and that's our, what we call our super mentors, to help to go back to that asset and let them know that you shared that information. Let me ask you, everybody listening to this call right now, what do you think that individual is saying about that young person when they found out that they shared that information? And if you're like most people, they say, oh, they're probably thinking that young person is doing a good job. They're doing change, right? So we're helping that young person what? Build social capital in the community. Why does why does the education have to be about the expert teaching a young person? Why can't education be about having the person help connect the young person to the assets in the community? Think about how that could revolutionize education. Think about how that could revolutionize opportunity for young people in the country, because we know the answer is truly in the community, because in every community, you have those who are cheating. So what we found out is that when you bring social capital assets to a young person, it helps move them along the stages of change and gets them to the place of where we want them to be, was maintenance, where they are engaging in pro-social behaviors, where they're doing things that promote their life, their freedom, and their future economic opportunity, and they maintain it. Now, there's always relapse, right? And then you continue, and at whatever point they relapse to, you continue pushing them forward. Social capital is key, because social capital is not only about economics. Mental health is a big issue in our communities. So do I want to refer a young person to a mental health clinic, or do I want to help that young person establish social capital with that mental health clinic? So not only do they have a connection to those resources when they need it, but after they leave our program, which they will, they'll know about a resource that they could share with their community. Radically different, radically different. Most programs have the, intake, service, outcome. But why does not initiation, self-discovery, make that connection, right? So the young person now has a connection to the financial literacy program. They have a connection to the program that offers the job credentials. And you can strategically do that through a social capital framework, like we do. Our research shows that 73% of young adults agree that there are adults in their lives who will be supportive in their career development journey, but they just not reach out to them. And 63% of adults say, yeah, I know some, I got some family members, who I could help out, but I just don't know what to do. No one asks, no one talks. We don't realize that we're all part of this thing called humanity. And, maybe we need be a little bit more humane. So at Social Capital Builders, we help young people through our curriculum and our training start by thinking about, of course, strong ties, weak ties, loose ties, and dormant ties. So that's kind of the 4 ties that we focus on. Loose ties are people your strong ties know. So it's really a 1 degree in type of thing. So basically you're connected to tons of people because everybody your strong tie knows you are just 1 degree away from. And we showed them how to close that loose tie and turn that loose tie into strong tie, right? So you have the ties, and I think everybody in this call knows about Grand Vetta's work. But then we break that down into familial connections, developmental, and gateway. So let me run through these real quick. Familial, family members, we just talked about that. Your uncle, what does your uncle do, right? Young lady, well, my mother, she's a seamstress and she doesn't know nobody. Your mother works for a corporation, right? Yeah, well, I speak to your mother, spoke to the mother finally spoke to the boss found out that his trusted worker who's been there for years has a daughter who wants to be in computers. Guess who's working for the computer department, right? That's how it happens. People don't understand the power of this stuff, right? Developmental, you haven't called them up for such a long time. Why not? Oh no, like you're so busy trying to network, right? And understand what's happening when they're networking, right? The opportunity cost is lost social capital. Everybody think about that. The cost of networking is lost social capital, right? Now we know, it's kind of cognitively and emotionally difficult to maintain connections with more than 5 or 6 or 7 people at any given time. So when you're out there trying, here's the killer right? Here's the killer. I hate using the word because we deal with that, but here's the thing. How many of y'all have business cards that you never even used? What happens to you every time you take a business card? Oh yeah, let's talk. And guess what happens? Nothing happens. You're losing social capital. Right. So I'm at the point now I don't even take business cards no more. I put you in them. If you meet with me, we got to meet 6 times. That's what I told y'all, because you have to build relationships. And you can't build relationships with everybody. So you have to be strategic about who you build relationships with. Right. And it's more of an Afrocentric, I want to say, design maybe than a Eurocentric that might focus more on, and this is basically what I see in the United States, on meeting and networking, but building the quality of the village. We kind of have the song, we're part of a global village, right? And then gateway connections are people in key industries that you do not know, but you may know somebody who knows. Maybe your institution, organization. So clearly, if you're in a school, it's more likely that somebody in that school has a connection to that industry. Right? And we help young people look at these gateway connections. So the goal of our programs have young people to do social network analysis to identify familial, developmental, and gateway social capital assets, potential social capital assets. Then they begin the social capital building process with those potential assets. We focus on 3 things. So let me start off with social capital literacy. So, we have a test, we give you have to understand certain things about social capital, like bonding, social capital, bridging, and the stuff that we normally cover in our courses. Redundancy, we give you a redundancy test. You got to know about the reality of the hidden labor market, different types of things. So we spend a lot of time on social capital literacy to help young people really understand what social capital is, and also look at other forms of capital, right? Financial capital, right? So if you think about financial literacy, a $611 million business in schools among the United States, but not $1 in social capital literacy. What's the problem there? Yes, young people don't have the money, but they have the social capital assets, which is money. And based on our work, we say about $2,400 per person. And we could back that up. For every gainfully employed person in your network who you have social capital is because you get what the information, the help they can give you getting a job quicker, giving you some information. On average, it's worth $2,400. So if you want a wage increase and you're making a minimum wage, connect to 6 people, you make about another $14,000. But you gotta build those relationships and use those relationships. Social network analysis, very important. Knowing who, it's not only what you know, it's not only who you know, it's who knows you and likes you and where you go that matters, right? So looking at who you know, social network analysis is really, we don't have to make this a mathematical, Sarah's my data science from Carnegie Mellon. She's on the call. She can tell you all that. We don't need to go that deep. Right? You can do social network analysis activities if you're in a program and there's construction. So let's say construction, computers, and healthcare, and that's the school, right? And then when the kids first come into the school, most programs only ask for who do we contact in the case of emergency, It's a wasted opportunity. So you have an activity where you say, okay, break you up into groups. Now we want to see which group has the most connections and who knows somebody who works there. You do that, you realize that 50% of the class knows people in those industries. So why aren't you engaging the assets of the young people to help them build these economic opportunities? It's phenomenal work. I just did a class with Catholic Charities in New York City, which is hilarious. And a young lady is going through strong ties and stuff like that. She oh my God, I know President Biden. I know President Biden. I should have told her to come on and tell the story. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, how do you know the president? Well, I know the president's photographer. And that's my strong tie because I know them on a first name basis and they know the president. So he's my loose tie. So I know President Biden. True story. Few weeks ago, right? So Ava was featured on the New York Times as students who are being adversely affected by COVID, right? Being stuck in a house and all that. They did a full story on her. So she has the woman's number in her bag. I'm like, call her up. I don't know what to say. I said, give her something. I don't know what I said, social capital is about giving. Call her up and say, thank you. I'm in the social capital building program with Catholic Charities. I'm learning several things. Is it okay if I keep you updated on my progress? What did the lady tell her? Of course you can keep me updated on your progress. Guess who's doing an internship now at Cornell University? Boom! Puts chills on my spine. Because no one told Ava that. How many kids do we have in these New York City summer work experience programs? 10,000 this year? And they're gonna finish their summer work experience opportunities and they're not gonna receive a tool to stay connected to these adults who started to care about them in the workforce? Am I the only one, Tristan, who really freaks out about this? Do you understand what I just said, everybody?
Yeah, absolutely.
10,000, no, excuse me, it's 100,000 New York City kids are gonna have jobs this summer. And there's no discussion about giving them tools to stay connected to their summer work site supervisors. I'm just gonna let y'all marinate on that because maybe I'm just obsessed with this stuff and like Tristan, I don't sleep, but maybe I'm just wrong, okay? It's social capital development. And we have an app, a web app that does that, right? So the social, but we also do it without the web app, right? So we have a process that helps people build social capital. All right, so how we measure social capital, this is what we call the Cardi index, right? And when I'm finished, y'all can ask questions and Sarah will take it away. But so it's compassion, assistance, reciprocity, trust, and information. So that's what we define as the currency of social capital. Right. So I judge, me and Tristan did it before, but I judge the social capital I have with Tristan based on my Cardi score. Right. And then so and how I figure it out is I would have to speak to Tristan and I would actually rate how I believe he would rate my compassion, right, as my understanding of his goals and his reason and the reasons behind them, and then having a discussion on how I can improve that goal. Right. So like I think he would give me a 4 or 5 because we speak, right? Assistance, right? How would he rate my ability to give back to social capital research? Well, I'm proactive on that. They have this new project that he's working on. I signed up. I'm ready to give, right? We reciprocate with our webinars, right? Reciprocity, right? The willingness of me to give back to social capital research. Oh no, his ability to give back to us, clearly high. Trust. What type of trust does he have in me? Belief in my credibility, my character. Well, we've had discussions. He's checked me out on the internet. He knows I'm credible. He knows I've been doing this for my whole life. That's high. Information. Are we exchanging information? Yeah, hey, check out this report. Hey, check out this research. Hey, go listen, look at my thing. Whatever you need, Ed, you got it. Information. That's a relationship. That's social capital. If you don't have that, you don't have social capital. You're networked. Right, and we're doing all cool data science stuff with try to figure this out and measure it and come up with different. Are you a RTIC or like so? But we got to figure that out, and we're trying to raise money so we can do this research. Which in the United States, people don't even want to talk about social capital. They think I'm a communist. I got a business. Like I'm a guy, like, you know, like, or I don't know what is going, I don't know what the problem is in the United States, but there's only like a handful of us who are doing this work, to be honest. And I don't know. All right, so some of the outcomes we're seeing, improved 12-month adult mentoring. So that's a category that, so mentoring programs are having a hard time getting mentors in the lives of young people, especially high-risk young people, right? And we know the harmful effects of when a mentor leaves a young person and they ghost them, right? So, you know, that's a significant problem with a lot of mentoring programs in the United States. And then, you know, sometimes people think that social capital, the only way of getting that is mentoring. And that you have tons of mentors who don't have social capital, right? They can't pass the Cardi score, right? Because and remember, it's a two-way process. So as I'm determining how Christian would rate me, he has to do the same for me, because there's no giver or receiver in the social capital building relationship. Both could be exchanged at any given time. So the giver has to become the receiver. Does that make sense? The giver has to become the receiver in social capital, right? And that's a beautiful thing for people to understand, right? And actually, you know, I'm working with a lot of key industry executives with some of the mentoring groups I have here at the Maryland Innovation Center, and we're looking at work on helping people, key industry stakeholders, talk about people who are not normally in their network. And, you know, everybody's understanding the concept of homophily, right? And how, you know, segregation built upon years of discriminatory housing practices and racist beliefs continue to this day has kept communities separate. We live in a very separate, segregated society in the United States. Schools, communities, it's ridiculous. And when that is, I don't want to say no fault of your own, but when it's the fault of the collective society, what is the collective society's role to understand who is not normally in your network, and what do you have to do to address that? So as we are looking at the data science and how to help people determine that, what if a white male would say, you know what, Ed is absolutely right. I did some social network analysis. I looked at my 20 past emails. I looked at my 20 past social media posts, and I looked at my 20 past and they all go to white people. So you know what? What I am going to do is ask Ed to bring in his 17-year-old son, and I'm going to sit down with that young man and tell him that I am in his network and that I am his social capital asset. And I want him to keep me updated in his on his progress in school. And I am going to forward a lot. I'm going to put him on my list. He's going to get information from me every month. Could that you think about it? Could that do something? Could that do something? All right. Innovative work-based learning, right? You know, like, listen, you know, they're paying kids for perfect attendance. Why not pay them to build social capital? Right? You go outside, you speak to somebody at the drug treatment program, you ask them questions, you come back and share that information, you stay there, you keep them updated on your progress in the program, because we know we want people to build those relationships. There's nothing wrong with incentivizing it. In our work in violence prevention, we know incentives works. You can incentivize people to stop shooting, right? So you can incentivize them to build social capital. All right, so let me move on, because as you can see, so what if there was a solution? What if we could do all this? Yeah, great. All right, so we have 4 things. This is kind of like my sales presentation, but we have the My Opportunity Hub, and you can check it out on our website. We have the fiscal curriculum. You can check it out. Up Down is our violence prevention curriculum, and our training, of course. This was actually training done last week in Rockford, Illinois, right outside of Chicago, with a program that's it's called Youth Build. It's called Comprehensive Community Solutions, but they run a Youth Build program, and they're adopting social capital framework for the young people they serve. I don't know if I really want to get into the technical aspects of the curriculum. What time is it, Tristan?
35 minutes past.
So I'm 35 minutes in? Yes. All right, so I can keep on going. All right, so our curriculum has young people identify, access, connect, build, manage, and maintain. So, and this is good, I think, for people to see how we work. So you're not going to get on the app unless you go through the curriculum, because in the curriculum, it's all about connecting, right? So in the curriculum, you engage in the process of identifying potential social capital assets. So the social network analysis activities are built into the curriculum. So for example, identify a family member who has a resume and then speak to them about what they do with their resume and how they got their resume. So by the time the kid is talking to the kid about the resume, they say, I didn't know you were looking for a job. Well, you identified a potential family member. Do you want to make them part of your hub? Right? Think about gateway assets. So that all that happens. So it's an experiential curriculum that young people have to go out there and build connections. As I was saying before, we realize the importance of that. So our whole curriculum is centered around that. So here we talk about assets. What's an asset? What's, this is kind of, but we're taking that financial literacy and spinning it on asset as a human being, right? Types of social capital connections and, all that stuff. The curriculum status. If you look at this, and I don't know if you see it, but we have a pre-program activity, right? So that's where the young person goes out and reaches out to a social capital asset, a potential social capital asset, and brings that information back to the class. And then they showcase that as part of the module. So each module could be anywhere from 10 hours long, but in those modules, those activities take place. These are some of the topics that we cover in fiscal. And it's not fiscal, it's foundations in social capital literacy. So we're not talking about financial literacy. That is My Opportunity Hub. This is our platform that helps young people build social capital. Now, for younger kids, we don't really let anybody under 16 use it. And we just actually launched it this month. So it's for 16 and up because of age, we can't get, I'm not gonna ask their uncles to take a background check. But there is the paper version of our process, which we call a SCOP. It's a social capital opportunity plan, right? So they'll get a SCOP. In fact, we're actually going to come out with a planner to help, so we can show you how to build social capital. All right, so MIO is based on principles of networks, small networks, right? We know small networks, closed networks. Now, we know there's a problem with a closed network. A closed redundant network is the KKK, right? But we're talking about young people are trained in reciprocity. They talked about echo chambers. So we want to create that small network, right? So that small network is that one young person and 6 opportunity guides. And that's the opportunity guides are a combination of familial, developmental, and gateway assets that are identified in fiscal. And then the young people invite them to the hub after they've completed fiscal. Number 1, reciprocity. All the activities that they participate in while they're in our hub is all about building all those things right there, the Cardi principles. All right, so first time we start off with reciprocity exchange. So for example, and even with the entrepreneurs I work with, I'm doing this with Syracuse and actually cities, we have to have the adults pre-identify what they need help with. And so everybody want to build social capital with me? Write me a LinkedIn review. Like that, and that's the key. Like I'm dealing with nonprofit organizations, right? And they're like, oh my God, yeah, this other organization, we have MOUs, right? But there's no social capital. MOUs are memorandum of understanding. So we're talking about, okay, so you have your hub circle. Now, your hub central, which is your organization, your hub circle of the 6 organizations that are instrumental to helping you serve your community. How do you build social capital with those organizations? Choose simple things that you can do for these organizations because social capital is about giving. They don't think about it. Maybe you can go to the other staff person and give them a LinkedIn review. Help them, so it's simple things, but we do the same thing with our platform. So the young people identify the things that they need help with, and we have 20 pre-populated things. So we don't let them choose because we have to control. We don't want no adult saying, hey, I want you to come over to my house. No, right? So adult might say, hey, I need a good recommendation of a book, or I need to understand how to use my social media better because I'm technically incompetent or whatever, right? And then if they help each other out, they do something and then they help each other out. Right. So I'm not going to get too much into it because I know connection points, same point, right? We understand that people do not like there's a lot of hesitancy, and probably the biggest challenge we see in training is like young people are just very people are just generally uncomfortable reaching out, right? So what we realize is that 400,000 years of evolution us as a human species has taught us to be very careful, right? Because like we were in tribal societies for such a long time that you just don't go, but we just been like modern humans for 300, 400, 3,000, 4,000 years. So a lot of people are reluctant to go out there and just meet people, right? It's genetically implanted in us, right? So, our mind always wants us to be safe, so we don't reach out. So that's why, like when Tristan, I go, what do you like to do? He's like, I like to mountain bike. Oh, I'm a triathlete. Oh, yay. Like you find those connection points that signal safety. We call them markers, right? We see them in the animal kingdom with pheromones, right? So when there's certain markers and you're able to establish those markers, you have a more likelihood of building that social capital and those connections. So it's very easy to help young people understand like, yeah, he might be a white dude, but guess what? He might like football, or he might be the oldest child or the only child. You got to find out about those connection points, identify them, connect, and then use them. Learning and giving and doing. We call this, in our process, we call signaling, the process of keeping an adult updated on your professional development, because it leads to something called anchoring, getting an adult emotionally invested in your career development, right? So we want young people to teach them the anchoring process, and it's very simple. Keep them updated on the positive stuff you're doing, right? Think about it. What if your nephew, because I'm pretty sure everybody has a nephew. What if he sent you an email once a month? Hey, auntie, I'm doing this, that, and the third. Everybody's like, yeah, I would love to hear that, right? Because now they would be in that information flow, right? You would definitely have that compassion. You could provide assistance, right? You'll develop trust, right? Information is flowing, or you could flow information back, but that's a simple process that we're not teaching our young people the importance of signaling. Right? Think about all those kids in the summer program. What if they would signal all these workforce people that they just gonna leave? Hey, guess what? I went back to school. Guess what I learned? Guess what I'm doing? Guess what I'm giving every month? Where would they be with those people in 12 months, even after leaving the job? You answer the question, not me. And if the answer is what I think you're saying, then why aren't we doing this? All right, and then we measure the social capital, right? So we have them fill out an assessment and rate each other and do stuff like that. But so I'm running out of breath. But okay, once again, so we train entrepreneurs, the South Success Program in Howard County, same process, but we do it for adults. And we're very proud of this program. We're going into our third cohort. And it's producing phenomenal results, because even though it's a 5-week program, when it's over, they stay part of what we call the Success Syndicate, and we're sharing information and building social capital and giving back to organizations. So one part is actually the 2 white women in top, one is she has a doll business, amazing, right? Like antique dolls. And then the other one does helps you organize your digital photography. And so Rachel, the one who does the digital photography, is offering workshops to the business membership organizations that are in our state. So I've asked every entrepreneur to come up with one thing they offer, and another one at the 3 African-American women. One is into wellness. So she's offering wellness workshops, but that's our way of building social capital with the business development organizations. But it takes time, it takes resources, it takes planning, and we're growing. So we're trying to meet that challenge, but it's very exciting work. Some of our violence prevention work is really taking hold. We're looking for investments so we can do more studies on the outcomes of it. But we're working with Syracuse, New York, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Youth Advocate Programs is a national organization in the United States and actually abroad. I think they're in they're in Ireland, and they're in, I think, El Salvador, but they're adopting a lot of social capital model, because for very high risk youth, you want to get them a job, but sometimes they might be at that stage of change where they're not ready for full-time employment. So how do you enhance their economic opportunities? Have them build connections to organizations in the community, right? Where So once that young person gets off that length of stay, let's say they were sentenced, not sentenced, but let's say they were assigned to the, the juvenile detention for 8 months, you want to make sure that they're committed, right? You want to, you understand that the young person is not going to be with you forever. You want to make sure they're committed to the social capital resources in their community, and they're doing that extremely well. With cities, for example, I actually was on the phone. We're launching. This is in Syracuse. So the Hub Central, and Sarah's working on this extensively, is the organization. The Hub Circle are the 6 organizations that they feel are instrumental to their mission. So it could be mental health, it could be job training, it could be housing, and they're building that social capital. And as you see, we're looking for those reciprocal relationships where the dark shaded weighted or everything else is kind of just a network, but you want to find the broker. So we're helping them identify the organizations that can help them not only serve their clients the best, but that can help them get connected to other services in their community. So that's one thing we're doing. And these are some of our clients right now. And this is my team. And I am done. But you know what? I just want to tell you one thing, right? So remember I told you about Ed DeJesus, right? Because I was able to go to college. And for years now, because of that experience, I have been able to go around this country, this wonderful country, and tell young people a very important message. The same message that my best friend told me. Wait, hold up. I know someone who could help. You have another move. And that move is the wonderful programs that are out there trying to help these young people get off the streets, right? And what we bring to the program is not only the young people, but we bring the message about social capital and how to help those young people do better. So that's it. Tristan, I'll take any questions. Sarah, you here with me? Yeah, Sarah's here. And we also have Joel. Joel is a young man who's been running a financial literacy program for young people in United States. And he'll also be available to answer some questions.
Great. Thanks, Ed. Fantastic presentation. It's so wonderful to hear social capital really being applied in a practical sense. It seems like working so much in research and in theory, quite often we feel a bit disconnected, I think, from that really practical application of applying it in a way that people really understand and making a real difference. So it's fascinating to hear about what you're doing, and it sounds like, and it really is a fantastic program that you're working on. So we'll open it up for questions from the audience. I'd like to start with a question, Ed. In the work that you do you find that people's social skills or their ability to communicate with other people limits their ability to really make use of their social capital?
I would say yes. I would say it's practice, right? So if no one has emphasized the importance of social capital, then you haven't invested in the attitudes, tools, beliefs, values, and behaviors that support it, right? So I definitely think so. And, I'll tell young people in a minute, so this is my main thing, right? This is what Will Smith really pissed me off. And I don't know if y'all know about what happened, right? But he smacked Chris Rock, right? And for years, remember, we believe that this stuff is not taught, it's caught, right? So when I'm in front of young people, right, and I'm talking about social capital, and I'm talking about the hidden labor market, and it's not only what you know, it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows you and likes you. And I want you to try to visualize this. I can tell them that all day long, right? But what I want to help young people understand is that your modus operandi, the mean thug, the look. If the number one way people get jobs is through social capital, getting people to like them and care about them, and your modus operandi is to intimidate people, then you commit an economic suicide, son. Let's be real, right? But, I tell them that, but why don't I help them self-discover it, right? So we grab the Black Business Magazine, right? I say, okay, let's go through the Black activity. This is like social network analysis, right? Go through the Black Business Magazine, count the number of smiling faces. You ready? Everybody go. Everybody got a magazine? I want to see that. Go. 2, 3, 8, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 20, 50 smiling faces. Good. Okay, good. Who got the, okay, you got the right number. All right, good. Okay, now everybody take out the hip hop magazine, count the smiling faces. Page 50, there's Will Smith. You know what I mean? He's the only person smiling. Now he's slapping people upside the head. Will, you messed me up, man. But the point is, you got 80 smiling faces over here and one here. What type of message do you think that's sending to the public, right? So now the young people are having the conversation. It's not the expert on top, it's the young people having the conversation. All right, now let's go speak to a successful entrepreneur, a business leader, and now they get that information and they bring it back to the group. Because my job as the facilitator is not to teach, it's to connect. So, but yes, so but I would say that's the result of people not teaching young people about the importance of social capital. And if you did, they would just naturally put more effort into it and build that skill set.
Yeah, and that's an important point, I think. So in the work you do you come across some individuals who they follow the process, they're really great at connecting with people, but they don't have any success, and maybe there's a bit of narcissism or a bit of self-interest, or a bit of like there's something going on in the way in which they're communicating and they're interacting with people that is really undermining their ability to take advantage of these kinds of relationships that they might have?
Well, but I think, it's like someone for everyone. I never really met anyone who wasn't able to, start that social capital building process because of their so-called, they might, that's why, Trisha, that's why that social capital is so important, right? So if you're trying to, you go into a party and you have social capital with the person who's running a party, you say, who in here would best connect with me? Right? So that your social capital helps you uncover the people who are more likely to get along with your style, if I could say that way, right? So that's why social, even with the job market, right? Saying, okay, what, who I am, Ed DeJesus is I'm really passionate, who do you think would really like to work with me? You're like, Ed, this person would be great. So that's why helping young people, not even changing their behavior, but finding out about social capital so they can make the right match, the right connection.
So what you're saying then is that when they learn about social capital and its importance, they're less likely to be narcissistic and self-interested and those things?
I don't think they would less likely. I think hopefully, they wouldn't, but I think they would be able to manage their behaviors a little better by finding places where, that is more, where they can make a better match.
Yeah, because it seems so subtle and subjective and it's interpreted. You can be talking to someone for 30 minutes and building a really great relationship and reciprocity backwards and forwards. But then if you just get a subtle hint that they're acting in self-interest and they're just looking out for themselves and they're selfish, then you walk away from that conversation not feeling quite so positive about that connection that you've just made. So it seems like it's such an important thing. And it seems like most people in modern society don't necessarily have these skills. But I think I'm also hearing what you're saying, that when people understand the importance of social capital in these relationships, well, they're less likely to sabotage them in that kind of way as well.
They're less likely to make better matches. But remember, I don't think social capital is going to be made in one meeting. It's, we're saying at least 6. So it's going to have to be a series of interactions and exchanges where those exchanges can be made, right? So you have to give young people an opportunity to, learn about compassion and practice it, right? Compassion we define as an understanding of someone's struggle and the willingness to help alleviate the causes and conditions that gave rise to that struggle, right? It's about giving them the opportunity to provide assistance. How can you actually have social capital unless you really provide assistance to someone? And I think people when young people say this to me all the time, I don't have nothing, I don't have anything to give. And then it's so simple. We just did this, take the alphabet and talk about, use the alphabet and every letter, talk about how can you give to the business. So young people are saying, see, I can call my friends, I can, and tell them about the business. I can let the business owner know that I did that. I could offer to give out flyers for the business. But when you help people understand the importance of giving and help them think of strategies on how to give, right? That is the currency of social capital. So social capital has to be practiced, and it's not you could network all you want, right? But that's not social capital building. Social capital building is when you have an exchange of what we call those Cardi principles.
Yeah, absolutely. Shall we open it up for questions from other people? I don't want to dominate all of the time. I've got lots of questions, of course. Daniel, I think you had a few questions in the chat. Did you want to unmute yourself and pose one or more of those questions?
I have Sarah here too, so if you have any data questions or what we're trying to do, please ask Sarah.
Hi, Edward. It's good to finally hear you face to face.
Hey, Dan, what's up, Twitter buddy?
Connected on Twitter for quite a while.
Yes, indeed.
A number of different questions. I could go into a deeper conversation. One that I think of is when we think of all people, and all people would benefit from understanding their network and understanding how to give help to their network and gain help from their network. Within that context, if we looked at demographics and mapped demographics, then like in a big city like Chicago, you can see areas of high poverty. Kids who live in high poverty neighborhoods have a more difficult time building an expansive network of people who might help them in jobs and careers, because there aren't that many people with jobs and careers in their close neighborhood. So that is one context in which to think about what you're talking about. In any given city, leaders could geographically map where poverty is and begin to do things to say, well, how do we help kids in these areas learn to build networks and use networks? The second part of that is I use a timeline. Much of what you're talking about has a great dependent on the motivation and the effort of the mentee to nurture and build the network, or build the network and nurture the network. And that takes a certain amount of emotional and maturity. I focus on starting the process as early as kids in elementary school, where organized tutor mentor programs could connect kids to people who don't live in their neighborhood and work in jobs and careers. And if those programs keep the kids and the volunteers connected to each other for many years, then those turn into people who, as kids are in high school, begin to say, well, let me help you with a part-time job, or let me help you this, or let me help you with a college application. And if they can continue, they can let me help you find a job or advance in your career. That's happening in a lot of different places, but I don't see a lot of those places talking about it in terms of social capital. And I don't find very many places with an intentional effort to help kids build their networks and map the networks in the ways you're talking about. And I think just the awareness of social capital as talking about mentoring in the terms of bonding or bridging social capital would be a big breakthrough.
Yeah, definitely. No, and just in terms of the high poverty areas, we work in tons of high poverty areas, and that's why we think social network analysis is very important. We know that some organizations, especially foster care agencies and many social service organizations, are engaged in family fact finding, where you take a young person who's been in the foster care system and they help, and they do some type of social network analysis to help them identify family members who can support them in care. I have a challenge in believing that in working with cities and working directly with young people, when you do some serious social network analysis, you usually find, that employed aunt, they all have a former teacher. All the kids that I'm working with in Schenectady, New York, guess what? They have a probation officer, and the probation officer, and they have a judge. And those are social capital assets if you help the young person reframe it, right? So helping them reframe, looking at that judge as, oh my God, this is the person who's trying to lock me up. No, the judge is not trying to lock you up. In fact, the judge is the best person to know if you want to get a job, right? So many young people don't have a connection to a judge, and helping young people understand that, and understand that your former teachers, your former employer, when I speak to young people and I ask them, how many programs have you been in? Like they say 3 or 4. What have you done to contact that former program director and update them on your progress? Nothing. So I think that, in some of the work on the Search Institute, they also articulated that young people don't have these assets. I haven't found that at all. I think we don't have the skill sets to help young people do social network analysis and help them uncover who these positive social network actors are, and giving them tools to build social capital. And I guess in our model, we uncover that because we say we're gonna pay you $50. They find people out the woodwork, but they're there. And even when communities have high unemployment rates, and if you look at a high unemployment rate of 20%, that still means people in that community are employed. There's some people employed. There are organizations in that community that you could connect them to. And I really challenge everyone here to think about, even in high poverty areas. Now, I'm not familiar with some of your areas, right? You may live in certain parts of a developing nation where that's a different story. But in the United States and in the communities we work with, we really help, young people identify who those institutional actors are, because they could be very powerful in helping those young people even overcome the racism and oppression that has kept that community in the way it's been for years. And when you ask, and think about it, when you ask somebody, how did you make it? It was always that one person, right? And so guess what? They already know that one person. You're helping them make that connection. So remember, social network and now social capital development is often not about finding the stranger who's going to make a difference in your life. It's looking at your current social network and you already have that connection.
Well, and to just the parallel with that, the more ways that the organizations in the child's life as he's growing up can help him or her connect to an expanded network of people and opportunities, the better.
Yes, indeed. But that's if the organization understands that importance, right? So if they're at a Boys and Girls Club, is that Boys and Girls Club recognizing the importance of connecting them to the Workforce Development Agency? Is the Workforce Development understanding the importance of connecting them to the, and sometimes these nonprofits operate in silos because of competition for funding. So I think that's another challenge that we face.
Well, I think a lot of them do some of this. I just don't think many of them talk about what they do or frame it in a social capital language. Or go deeper to intentionally talk about building and mapping networks and understanding how to nurture the network. Your work is providing some context that other people could look at and hopefully learn from.
And it's also allowing us to be much more purposeful and deliberative about what we do, because of course, what Ed's been talking about, we all do in some capacity every day. We do have relationships, we do reach out to people occasionally, so we do all of these things. It's part of what it means to be human, but we're not particularly aware of it. We're not purposeful or deliberative about it, and therefore we're not really maximizing the opportunities that can come from doing these kinds of things. And I think that what Ed's doing and really an understanding of social capital in general takes it from that sort of incidental, accidental byproduct of other activities and actually gives it a name, makes it something that we can be quite purposeful about, and therefore we can maximize those opportunities. But not just maximize the opportunities, but also minimize the risks and the damages that we might do if we're not aware of these kinds of things. When there's a phrase, burning bridges, when you betray trust or you're rude to somebody, like I think quite often people risk damage to important social relationships because they're not so consciously aware and purposeful about the way they do things.
Well, Ed mentioned two things, but didn't really talk about them a lot. One, he talked about if he had the capital, there's more things he could do. And then he talked about the competition among nonprofits for resources that keeps them from working with each other. One of the things that we all can do is to recognize that many of us have networks of people who may have wealth or foundations or philanthropy or whatever. And at any given time, through our social media, through our conversation, we could be saying, hey, I know this guy who's doing some good work. Why don't you take a look at him? That's a form of knowing your network and nudging your network that I don't think is used often enough. within all of this conversation about helping poor people, there was the lack of funds flowing into the neighborhood on a consistent basis to do work needed to be done is one of the impediments. But the willingness of us to tap our networks and say, why don't you direct some of your funding to this guy or this guy or this program or that program. And so while they're looking for help, you're doing things to direct help to them. And that's a form of social capital that I think we don't talk about enough.
You know, there's a, I'm trying to get on it now, and I really want to show it to everyone. And maybe I shouldn't, I don't want to call anybody out, but there's this group of, yeah, maybe it's not. There's this group of venture capitalists who have a particular website. It's really interesting. So you can go on this website and they'll say, okay, you want to get venture capital? Here's a list of venture capitalists, right? Who and what they do and how much money they put out. And press this button to see if the only way you're going to get to know them or meet them if you know someone who knows them. Right. So this is like venture capital, how much venture capital is based on who you know, right? But the interesting part is that it mines, and I think Sarah left, but some of the data science we're looking at, it mines emails, right? So it mines your email to see if you have a connection to the individual, but at the same time, it invites everybody who you submit to. So let's say I think, well, maybe Dan might have a connection to that person, so I'm going to put him in there, but it's going to invite Dan to the system, right? That's not social capital at all. But I'm just using that as an example of, you know, how this is real and how it determines not only who gets the funding, but it determines on, you know, what type of research is funded. We're actually going for a National Science Foundation grant now to do a lot of the data science work behind it. One of our dreams is to take the hub, right? So once we have the hub and we have data collected on, you know, the young person's interaction with their opportunity guides and their opportunity guides interaction with the young people, and have a determination. So to everybody think about it, like think about a pool filled with these little hubs, these little universes of this one young adult and their 6 guides. And that young adult is actively social capital building and is being reciprocated by their guides. And we determine that. Then imagine those guys being able to bring jobs to the system. And at a certain point, the bubble disappearing, right? Now we know the young person understands social capital and has practiced it. Now that young person has, this is what we're calling the opportunity pool. And now they have access to any opportunity in the pool, but they don't go to the job or the internship. They get directly connected to the person who posted it. Radically different than most job board sites. So that's one thing. So Dan, if you asked us what we want money for, that's what we want. We want to be able to do the research and collect the data and develop the data science behind this. So what would be the excitement or impetus for a young person to want to be part of the hub? Because it's where opportunity happens. And it's where opportunity that is real, because you're not only being connected to the internship, you're connected to the person who posted it. So anyway, that's some of our dreams. And when we get there, we're pushing hard.
It would certainly be good to see a lot more collaboration between NGOs, because I think we often see, like what Dan was talking about, we see this perceived competition that if I help a different organization, that they might get funding instead of me. Whereas, of course, we're all working on the same sorts of issues. And so if we could actually work together, then we'd get positive benefits for everybody. But we have this mindset of competition. And I think we see the same thing in our learning environments, you know, where individual students don't necessarily want to help another student because they might get a better mark and push them down the bell curve or something. Whereas learning, of course, is a collaborative type of exercise. If we learn together, we both learn better. So I think that there's a bit of mindset change that needs to occur, where we let go a bit of our own self-interest and we see the collective benefits that we can get by collaborating with each other.
That's a very important message, Tristan, that has to be resonated, you know, and consciously thought about, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's why we say assistance, like, we ask, and that's why we'll put, what are you doing to provide assistance to another organization? And I think that helps break that down.
Yeah. So we've got a question that came through in the chat. We'll get to Telly in just a minute. So the question in the chat was, if we had in the curriculum of elementary and high school methods to teach with the fundamentals of social capital in the disciplines, do you think that in 20 years we would have a territory with different characteristics?
Oh yeah, I think 100%.
So this question came from Edith, who's in Brazil, and I've talked with Edith before about the wider culture of distrust and the difficulties of really operating within that background sort of context of culture. And if we're in schools we were teaching young people these sort of fundamentals, then in 20 years' time, you'd imagine most people in society would have some different values and different ways of operating that could be some massive changes for all of society and the economy and everything that we do. And it's not just a problem for Brazil. I'm sure it's also a similar thing for the United States and probably every other country in the world.
I just think that, when we talk about social capital, we use my my currency, just compassion. I completed a compassion study with it's called the Compassion Cultivation Institute, is with Stanford University. It was like a 2-week, 3-week process, but it was good being part of that because, I even in practicing this social capital, when I started looking at compassion, I realized that if we're teaching that in schools, and that might be part of social emotional learning, but self-compassion is huge, having understanding that, like I tell my entrepreneurs, like, I'm trying to push you, but I'm not trying to make you feel bad if you don't make the contacts and reach out. We all have to be understanding of each other and our flaws, right, as well as our promises. But I just saw Sarah come back. Sarah, she was just here a second ago. She just left. Okay, I was gonna have Sarah talk a little bit about some of the work we're doing with data science, but she just left. But I think if it's part of and connecting to, I think you build compassion. I think when you help people understand, especially connect to people who are not normally in your network, and we're trying to make that a buzzword, right? Not normally in your network, and you actively go to reach out and build social capital with individuals who are not normally in your network. And what does that mean? Like, for me, being a youth worker, my whole career has been around nonprofit organizations. So I had to make the decision to come to the Maryland Innovation Center, where I am now, my office, around a lot of tech people in order for me to be in the information flow that could help me grow this business, right? It was a conscious decision about relocation of myself. And I think helping people, and sometimes people don't have that opportunity, I get it, but sometimes like looking at the redundancy in your network and then making a shift could really radically, transform opportunities for everyone.
Absolutely. We've got a few questions lining up. So we'll go Telly first, and then Beth, and then Stephen, and then Mike. So Telly, over to you.
Can I suggest Beth goes first, because I noticed she was trying to speak before me. After you, Beth.
Sure, Beth.
Thank you, Telly. Edward, I'm just like, I'm amazed by your work, and I feel that it reminds me, your presentation reminds me of this parable of someone going to seek God, right? And they go to the highest mountains, and they go to the bottom of the oceans, and they're coming up empty, right? And until they realize that the divine is within them. And so I just love how you're reframing value, right? And so in our racist society here, people of color have gotten countless messages. All of us have gotten countless messages that some of us are valued and some of us are not. And so just overcoming that racist, the racist value system and reordering it. And then there's the classist value system, which is, you don't have value unless you actually have real capital, right? And so you're, giving value to the individual, seeing them as a resource, and then seeing their invisible connections that are non-monetized and seeing the value in them. And that's just, you know, it's transformative on so many different levels. And so thank you for your work.
Thank you for that, Beth. Thank you.
I'll second that too. Should we move on, Telly?
Yes, Ed, I'd like to congratulate you for your achievement. It's really impressive what you've achieved. What your example demonstrates, I suppose it's a bit similar to Beth, in that you started your story by the two experience of rejections. And then you manage by luck in many ways to get to be connected. And that notion of connection and networking helps you to achieve what you've done. You've also, this is also based on my own work, in that, you know, Black people, their response to experience of racism is to start doing some reparative work within their community, in that you started demonstrating, as a result of racism, demonstrating care for your community. And that is one of, in terms of my analysis, that is one of the characteristics of being Black in a racist society. We try to take care of our own. However, there's a limitation to that. Your achievement is predicated on what the racist structure will allow you to achieve. I see your example is very, in terms some of the work I've done, you can only go so far, because that is what the structure will allow you to do. That you're talking about still trying to get funding, etc. You know, so for me, it's a familiar story, even in the UK, and your example has given me another kind of perspective in this notion of how Black people response to racism is to do reparative work within their own community. I congratulate you for it. The other point, in terms of theoretical, as you were talking, in terms of the way the structure allows you, is the Bourdieu's social and cultural reproduction. So in a way, you are helping to maintain, paradoxically, you're helping to maintain the system, even though you're trying to change the system, because the system can only allow you to go thus far.
Well, you know, I think it's really interesting to, you know, you definitely make me think about, yeah, you know, I come to the table and there's redundancy, right? So I'm helping young people, but my information is limited, right? Because of my social capital, right? So now the Ed DeJesus in the Maryland Innovation Center is different than the Ed DeJesus was in the inner city community, because now I'm coming to the table with a lot more information, even about internships. Like I have a lot more information about internships in the sciences and in the, you know, cybersecurity companies all around me right now, right? So yeah, so it is definitely, but I think it's helping people, no matter what race you are, understand what it means to exchange social capital, exchange information with people who are not normally in your network. So I suggest that when you have the white Ivy League student volunteering in the inner city, they have what we call bridging capital. So they can come in and say, okay, listen, I have some information that can help you go to a whole nother space. Whereas the worker like me might be able to provide a lot of bonding capital. So it's still, in terms of economic opportunity, bonding capital is probably even more important because it helps me get through those hard times. So I think we just got to be careful about, like, in terms of what type of capital is needed, or connecting capital, right? But helping people analyze that, okay, I have a lot of bonding capital, right? Ed is really bonding capital. Who's helping me get some new information, and making sure you make that connection on both sides? I think it's something that we can help people do better.
I think we've got at least 3 more questions and only about 10 minutes or so left. I think the next one was from Stephen. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Tristan, for, again, a great webinar this afternoon in Middle America. And Edward, fantastic presentation. Thank you so much for your work, and the passion comes through. Quick question, because I know we're limited on time. I'm just curious. I'm wearing 2 hats. One is as a program evaluator that's working with NSF-funded programs to do a lot of work in STEM education and helping students with career pathways, but also as a doctoral student thinking toward dissertation topics. And I'm curious what relationship you might see between students developing social capital and entrepreneurial mindset, given that you do, looks like, a lot of work with entrepreneurs.
Tell me a little bit more about what you're getting at with the question.
Yeah, so maybe do you see some co-development maybe of social capital and that entrepreneurial mindset that students carry with them into, any path that they choose? And as they maybe have entrepreneurial experiences, does that drive, social capital development? Or as they say, go through your program and make those purposeful connections, are they also maybe seeing the world more entrepreneurially? So it can kind of go both ways.
Interesting. So, we started the Social Capital for Entrepreneurial Success, and you can look at my website. It's called Success, under the premises that, social capital can help you scale up or start up a business, because yes, you need financial resources, right? You need funding, but the best way to get that funding is by having social capital, right? People who can put you in the information pipeline for funding, for assistance with contracting, marketing, accounting. But what I've been real surprised about, and most of my entrepreneurs are small businesses, but the lack of understanding about social capital when they came to the class. So, and this is just, so I don't think the entrepreneurial mindset in America has been based on understanding what it is to be a social capital builder. And I think that's because of the stories that we tell, right? So we tell a story about what's his face, Jeff Bezos, right? No one talks about, he had the social capital in coming into starting Amazon, where his family gave him $300,000, right? Or he was a former investment banker, right? It's kind of like we're always telling the story of the person who started out with nothing and built everything, but we don't talk about the role that social capital played in that. And having completed 2 cohorts of about 30 entrepreneurs, it's very surprising, Stephen, how social capital is not valued, to the point of being, when we do an activity every week, there's 3 things they have to do. First thing is you have to identify your strong ties, who don't know about your business, your weak ties, who don't know about your business, and your dormant tie, who doesn't know about your business, right? So every week you have that assignment, right? And then you come back to class and you got to talk about what you covered. It's amazing. Like, so they're not even educating people who are close to them about their business, right? The second thing we ask them to do is to make a connection with the business development organization in the county, right? So let's say Chamber of Commerce, right? They never thought about building a relationship with the head of the Chamber of Commerce, because they just don't know they could do it, right? That's really like something, far off for them, right? And then and the third thing we do is we have, it's called we usually do a 100K or a 500K hub, or your needs hub. So your 500K hub, so let's say you're a small business and you're trying to get to 100K. Who are the 6 individuals who right? Who can help you get to that 100K the quickest? Because we're saying, don't network, you're losing time, right? Focus on, like, for example, my business, right? I'm connected to the National Workforce Development Organizations. That's my hub. So I know my business model is going to be successful because I have strong brokers, right? Each one has like 100 programs underneath them, and I maintain those relationships. But they don't understand that, right? So when we're having them, think about like, who are they just, so I would just say that's very, I would love to read your study. Now on the other side are people, then I don't know, I really haven't looked at those who exhibit good social capital and do they have entrepreneurial skills. But you know what they said, the joke is like the person who walks into the room with this, so there's a guy in the money, the person who walks into the room with the money leaves with the social capital, and the person who walks into the room with the social capital leaves with the money. So you figure that one out. But I don't know if that helps, but that's what we're seeing at the class. And if you want, and if you're interested in doing some work, I'm pretty sure I can get you some data from the students. They're all adults, so about their social capital. Now I'm thinking about the ones who are revenue. Their revenue. Well, yeah, I think business has taught them the importance of social capital. But even those individuals are saying, man, I never thought about reaching out to my high school. Like I never thought about telling a high school that I'm a business owner, right? So anyway, that's kind of on the entrepreneur side.
So are there any other questions? I saw a couple of hands go up and then go down again. Does anyone else want to ask any questions or pose anything else? We've got a couple of minutes left. Ed, I wanted to pick your brains about an idea that's probably along the lines of what you're already doing, but maybe extending a little bit further. A few people over the years have approached me suggesting some sort of a broad tool for evaluating people's social capital on almost like on a community societal level. Probably something similar to China's social credit system, you know, where people can evaluate other people's pro-sociability, and you can basically end up with a score that's quite public that can be used to evaluate people's social credentials, if you like. In China, the social credit system was used to almost like for tax breaks for a whole range of different things. So the question really is, do you think that sort of a system is feasible? Because to me, as soon as you build some sort of system where individuals can get personal gain by acting pro-socially, they just find ways to manipulate the system to get that individual gain, and they don't necessarily actually build social capital for the society. But maybe it is possible, but it seems like a very delicate and difficult technical solution to produce. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, first, I would definitely love to read more about it and learn, especially about the system in China. I did not know about that. I would love to see what the research says about that. So we have our Cardi tool, right? So we're trying, so I rate myself based on how I would perceive your rating of myself, because I don't want to put that on you. And having a high Cardi score would mean I would get a break on my taxes. Interesting. So, you know, I'm thinking just, I go back to my work with young people. So we talk about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, right? So there's this intrinsic motivation to go ahead and be a good person. But the real value of being a good person is intrinsic. So what we tell programs is don't get caught up in giving young people the intrinsic, extrinsic motivator unless you're able to get the intrinsic motivator back. And I think that is the question with what you're saying, Tristan, is how do you use something that's with the extrinsic, whatever that social benefit is, the intrinsic value of giving to others has to be built along with that. So how we do it, if you have perfect attendance and you get your $25 gift card, before I give you that gift card, Tristan, I'm going to ask you, Tristan, how would this impact your life if you keep on showing up to school on time? In 5 years, where would you be? How would that make your family feel? Because in some artificial way, Tristan, you're giving me that intrinsic motivation back. You're telling me I would feel great. My mother will be happy. She'll smile. And I say, how would you feel when your mother's smiling? And when I feel that I got a good level of intrinsic motivation back from you, that means I got paid. I'm giving you your $25. So without knowing anything about this, I would say, just from my experience as being a youth worker, I would say just be careful or just build in ways to make sure you build in that intrinsic motivator, that what we call the intrinsic motivating factor.
Right. And it seems like you're probably getting that balance right with the way you're using those IT systems. But if it was a wider societal thing and it was like a credit check, you know, a financial credit check, you could do the same thing for like a social credit check on somebody, and potentially then it would influence your ability to get jobs or your ability to attend events or to get awards or even to the level of tax opportunities, you know, then it seems like a very difficult thing to do. I mean, it would motivate people to be more pro-social, but it seems like it might almost have the opposite effect too. So I posted a link to an article I wrote a couple of years ago about the Chinese social credit system in the chat. If anyone would like to have a look at that, explore that. In a little bit.
There's issues of equity too, right? Like if you've been in a community where so many young people are just, you know, operating on survival mindset, and survival for them is to have that mean mind, you know, about, you know, protecting yourself, then how far away are they from developing those skill sets for demonstrating that? So I would be very careful, but I think it's something that I would love to be part of it, to talk about.
Right. And certainly a few people have contacted me over the years. So different people, that is, independently. So it's clearly an idea that people are interested in developing something like that. I've always kind of steered clear of it because I just think it's far too complicated, far too difficult to get that balance right, basically. So any other questions or comments? I saw another hand go up temporarily. Was that Empower who did that? You feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to pose a comment or a question.
Yeah, how's it going, everyone? I think Ed already pretty much answered. I was going to ask about how to develop that growth mindset within the young adults, right? And that's when you started speaking about the intrinsic motivation. So I guess my question would be to further that, how do you get students to identify more of that intrinsic motivation and get them out of that survival, you know, mindset and, you know, that you were talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it's really back to social capital. And I hate to say it, every time you speak to me, everything is social capital. Like, people are like tired of me, but then they're like, you're right. But so when I say, Joel, one thing we're really in our, it's helping them connect to people who have overcome similar circumstances, right? And maintain that connection. And that starts, and we see that kind of serves as the impetus, or like, you know, what we see so much is a young person has a significant emotional event and they're ready for change, right? So somebody gets shot, oh, I don't, either you want to go back and shoot somebody or you want to change your life. Your high school class graduates, you got kicked out, you're feeling really bad, you want to go back to school, your mother dies, you want to honor her and go back to school, right? So they have these moments of epiphanies, whatever you want to call them. And then they go into a program, and the program goes, okay, bring in proof of address, income, and a form that's notarized. They take that spark and they just throw it out, right? So I think a lot of programs or NGOs, especially United, are really good at taking that spark. But how do you fan the spark and turn it into a roaring fire for change? And what we see, social capital is real important, because when you help young people make that connection to say, hey, look at, you know, so give me an example, Joel, because we both work in programs. So you come into a program, you know, bam, bam, sit down. Okay, the person to the left of you, you know, left, right of you, somebody's not going to be here. Nah, that doesn't work. But you come in and you have pictures of former graduates. You know, John overcame a drug habit. Now he's working at blah, blah, blah. So you have 10 pictures. And this, stay with me on this, right? So you come in the room, the young people, you say, okay, welcome to the program. Please walk around the room, look at these pictures of our former graduates, read their stories, and stand next to the picture of the one that strikes you the most, right? And then you ask them why, right? They say, well, and what are the 2 questions that you would have for this person or their employer if you had an opportunity to meet them? right? So we're all, so a social capital builder is always starting with connection in mind, right? And then now you send those questions to the student, right? They probably can't come in, but you send those questions to the student, they get back, oh, we got some responses, right? So the next day but that's the inspiration that young people get, because now it makes it tangible that yes, people overcome the barriers that I came through. You know, one thing we tell programs, like we ask them, what challenges do young people have completing your program? And they might say something like, what do you call that? Immediate gratification, transportation, and substance use, right? Those are the three main reasons why young people don't complete their program. Then I'm saying, well, find people who overcame those same institutions. Find the organizations that help people deal with those issues and start connecting young people to that from the Jump Street, because that's what you're saying is preventing them from being successful in the program. So connect them to those resources and connect them to the strategies, because I haven't been a substance abuse user, but connecting them to those who have overcome that and I think that's that's the way you turn that spark into a fire, as opposed to putting it out, which, you know, I think society is really good at putting out that fire for change. That's just my little 2 cents. So that's how that awakening or that desire for change is definitely maintained.
Thank you.
You're welcome, brother.
So Ed, we're pretty well over time already, but I really want to support what you're doing. I think it's fantastic work. I'm sure a lot of other people do too. So quickly, how can people support your program? How can they follow what you're doing, get involved, and support you?
But just go to socialcapitalbuilders.com, you know, put your email address in there so we can put you on our mailing list, and, you know, just keep on giving. You know, Tristan has a group that he's starting where we're asking everyone to contribute. So, you know, we have tons of need for research. You know, you can help us out with some research projects, ideas, serve on a think tank group for us, or, you know, or even speak to some young adults. You know, it's up to you. But I would say it's all about giving, and think about how, you know what you could do? You could just become a social capital builder and think about, you know, let's start with what we tell kids. Think about your familial connections, your developmental connections, right? And let's start with those two, familial and developmental, and reach out to one of them, somebody you haven't reached out to for a while, and let them know that, you know, you're there, you care, especially during this time of the pandemic. We all need it, and ask them to keep you updated on my progress. I've been doing that to my family members. I have a young cousin, in New Orleans. And, you know, I see what he posted on Facebook, and I reached out to him and said, hey man, you don't know me much, man. We never really met, but I just want to let you know I'm your second, third cousin, whatever. And, you know, I'm very proud of you. And, you know, if you need any help, especially in human services, you make sure you give me a shout. And every few months I reach out to him and say, hey, what's going on? What's going on? That's a dormant tie that now is a strong tie, right? So, you know, think about that. And if we all did that, right? And then think about people who are not normally in your network, right? And reach out to them. Think about, if you're white, who is that? You know, who is that? And I know it's hard. I'm just using race as an example, but who's that African-American colleague? And how would he feel if I spoke to his child, his son, about being part of that network? I think those conversations at that level really make the difference. That's it. That's all I gotta say. But you know, keep on checking in on us and giving us that motivation, because we need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anyone's doing research, you know, working for universities, and they want to engage with real practical, meaningful research in this area, then it sounds like Ed's the person to talk to about this.
Yeah, and actually with our Syracuse project, we definitely need help. I wish Sarah could talk to you about that. But, you know, when we're looking at the surveys we're using, and even trying to control for bias in the surveys, and the example, so every month they reach out to an organization, they do a Cardi score analysis, and they look at their low scoring area, and then they do a project in that area, and we have recommendations on projects. So we don't want to make this a big task, because one thing we realize when you're working with organizations, they're already overworked, they're already underpaid, they're tired. So now we're coming in with this other thing they have to do, and that's, you have to be sensitive to that. So we make it as easy as possible. But if anybody's interested in helping us out with that, we're launching that they're going to act. So actively every month they do an activity. They do the Cardi rating, and then they do something in one of those 5 areas. And then we're going to look at the impact of social capital. We on the organizations that participate, but if we have more resources, we kind of look at the directly on the people who participate in the project, but we want to do like a whole organizational survey. So let's say if it's Boys and Girls Club, and they were like, how do, did it influence the entire organization in some way? But that's just intensive research. And we just, how do you fund that when you're not a research organization per se? And that becomes challenging.
Partnerships, absolutely. Well, thanks, Ed, and we really appreciate your time and effort in putting into this presentation, and we also really appreciate the work you're doing as well, and the insights that it gives all of us. So next week is a completely different change of speed for our webinar. I'll be giving a presentation really exploring the meaning of social capital and the theoretical foundations of the different approaches that we see. So I think it really will help people to understand the really confusing, academic literature on social capital, and hopefully put some things in place and organize our thoughts around it. But it's a very big change of speed from today, very practical and hands-on, and makes a lot of sense in the real world. And next week's going to be more sort of meaning and theory and getting into that sort of stuff. But hopefully you can join us. I posted a link in the chat to that, but you can find all the details on socialcapitalresearch.com under events. So we'll end it there. Thanks everyone for being involved, and look forward to seeing you next time. So I'll just